Here's what's coming up on the world today. United Nations vote on Gaza humanitarian aid further delayed. Protests erupt in Argentina after new president signs economic reform decree. Plus, North Korea warns of nuclear attacks if an enemy provokes it with nuclear weapons. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. In Lagos, the United Nations Security Council vote on a bid to boost aid to the Gaza Strip and asked the UN to monitor humanitarian aid deliveries in the Palestinian enclave was again delayed at the request of the United States of America. Security Council President for December, Ecuador's UN Permanent Representative Jose Javier Lopez Dominguez told reporters the presidency would see the adoption today. The text drafted by the United Arab Emirates aims to dilute Israel's control over all humanitarian aid deliveries to 2.3 million people in Gaza. Currently, Israel monitors the limited humanitarian aid and fuel deliveries to Gaza via the Rafah crossing from Egypt and the Israel-controlled Kerem Shalom crossing.
The Council has agreed to continue negotiations today to allow for additional time for diplomacy, and the presidency will schedule the adoption for tomorrow morning. Okay?
10 a.m.?
No, we don't know that yet. We're going to put it in the morning.
We are aware and are part of very high-level discussions that are happening between capitals to try and reach a text that will in fact be adopted. The overriding objective of this resolution was always to try and positively impact on the ground for the people who need it the most. We have been working overnight, long hours. You have been here covering it, and we appreciate your patience with the Council. But we believe today giving a little bit of space for additional diplomacy could yield positive results, and we are going to be optimists and try and do that. Without going into too much detail, because these are Council deliberations, but I think everyone wants to see a resolution that has impact and that is implementable on the ground, and there are some discussions going on about how to make that possible.
Meanwhile, Chief Israeli military spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari says that ground forces have uncovered another network of infrastructure used by the Hamas leadership in the Gaza Strip. He was speaking in a televised press briefing on Wednesday. Mr. Hagari described the underground network as the base for the Hamas leadership movement. Israel accuses the militant group of deliberately locating tunnels and other military infrastructure among civilians whom it uses as human shields. And the United States says serious negotiations are taking place on a new Gaza truce and the release of more Israeli hostages. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had noted that the U.S. wants and expects Israel to shift its military operations in Gaza to a lower intensity phase, during which there will be more targeted operations focused on the Hamas leadership and its infrastructure. Speaking at a year-end news conference in Washington, Mr. Blinken added that once this shift happens, the harm done to civilians should decrease significantly.
We continue to believe that Israel does not have to choose between removing the threat of Hamas and minimizing the toll on civilians in Gaza. It has an obligation to do both, and it has a strategic interest to do both. We're more determined than ever to ensure that out of this horrific tragedy comes a moment of possibility for Israelis, for Palestinians, for the region, to live in lasting peace and lasting security. That out of this darkness comes light. Realizing that possibility will require all parties to make tough choices about the steps that they're willing to take, including the United States. We will test this proposition with the urgency and the creativity that it deserves and that America's interests demand. It's clear that the conflict will move and needs to move to a lower intensity phase. And we expect to see and want to see a shift to more targeted operations with a smaller number of forces that's really focused in on dealing with the leadership of Hamas, the tunnel network, and a few other critical things. And as that happens, I think you'll see as well the harm done to civilians also decrease significantly. We've said all along, and we have these conversations almost every day, that it is vitally important how Israel conducts its operations.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd visited the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier in the Eastern Mediterranean and thanked its crew for what he said was their role in helping prevent a broader conflict in the Middle East during the Israel-Hamas war. The nuclear-powered Ford, a small floating city of over 4,000 people with 8 squadrons of aircraft, became a powerful symbol of American resolve by rushing closer to Israel after it was attacked by the Palestinian militant group Hamas on October 7. The Ford is the U.S. Navy's newest aircraft carrier. Its air wing has carried out more than 8,000 sorties, more than a quarter of them since repositioning to the Eastern Mediterranean Sea after the war in Gaza began.
Are concerned about the conflict or the crisis spreading to the wider region. But to date, I think we've done a really good job of preventing that from happening, and we'll stay focused on that in the future. What the Houthis are doing affects commerce around the globe. Some 10 to 15% of global commerce flows through the Red Sea and through the Straits. So freedom of navigation is important to again, countries around the globe. And I think we'll see increased participation going forward.
In the meantime, Israeli government spokesman Elion Levi has welcomed the coalition formed by 10 navies to repel the Houthi threats. The Houthis, which control vast amounts of territory in Yemen after years of war, have since last month fired drones and missiles at international vessels sailing through the Red Sea. Attacks, it says, respond to Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip.
We, of course, welcome the international coalition of 10 navies to repel the Houthi terror pirate threat. This is a threat not just to Israel, but to global maritime trade, to the peace and security of international maritime routes. It is a global threat, and it is right that that be dealt with on a global level. And we thank our American allies for that forceful decision to secure freedom of navigation on the high seas.
In the meantime, Britain's defense ministry has released photographs of what it says shows a suspected attack drone downed by Navy ship HMS Diamond in the Red Sea. Britain's Ministry of Defense said on Tuesday that HMS Diamond would join a US-led international task force to safeguard commerce in the region. Alongside HMS Diamond, the task force currently includes 3 US destroyers and a French warship in the region. They are operating in the southern Red Sea, focusing on protecting freedom of navigation, international trade, and human life by countering illicit non-state actors in international waters. Meanwhile, the leader of Yemen's Houthis is warning that they will strike U.S. warships if Washington targets the Iran-backed militia. Abdel Malik al-Houthi was speaking by televised broadcast. The crisis in the Red Sea has grown out of the war between Israel and Gaza's ruling Palestinian Islamist group Hamas, and this, the latest conflict in the Middle East, to pit the U.S. and its allies against regional power Iran and its Arab militia proxies. And rising out of these developments, the head of the trade logistics for the UN's trade body is warning that disruption in the Suez Canal will have a negative impact on shipping costs and eventually lead to higher prices for consumer goods. Logistics chief Jan Hoffman adds that container shipping rates are now at an all-year high. The Red Sea is linked to the Mediterranean by the Suez Canal, which creates the shortest shipping route between Europe and Asia. About 12% of world shipping traffic transits the canal.
It's bad news because it reaches us at a moment when we already have some other trends that have a negative impact on shipping costs. In our latest review of maritime transport, we had already shown that the average distance of shipping cargo is already at, we think, probably historically high. At least we have data since 1980, and the typical distance has never been as high as today for different reasons. And the container freight rates have also already gone up. They have gone up to the highest rate in 2023. So the latest container shipping rates, they are still low compared to the supply chain crisis during COVID, but they are higher now than they were at any other moment in 2023. I mean, the Christmas presents, they are already here. They are not coming now through the Suez Canal. So if you have systematically higher shipping costs for manufactured goods, the consumer goods that you and I buy in the shop, it takes many months to really translate into higher prices. But it will come. So if this situation continues, it will have a bearing also on the prices we pay in the shop for our consumer goods.
Well, to the aftermath of the crisis, the World Health Organization has said that northern Gaza has been left without a functional hospital due to a lack of fuel, staff and supplies. According to the WHO, only 9 out of the 36 health facilities are partially functional in the whole of Gaza, adding that all these facilities are concentrated in the enclave south. WHO representative in Gaza, Richard Pipcorn, described Al-Ali Hospital as a shell of a hospital, saying it resembled a hospice, providing very limited care.
Only 9 out of 36 health facilities are partly functional in the whole of Gaza. All of these in the south. There are actually no functional hospitals left in the north. Al-Ahli was the last one, but is now minimum functional. Still treating patients, but not admitting new ones, along with Al-Shifa, Al-Ada, and Al-Sahaba Hospital. Until 2 days ago, it was the only hospital where injured people could get surgery in northern Gaza. And that was overwhelmed with patients needing emergency care. There are no operating theaters anymore due to the lack of fuel, power, medical supplies, and health workers, including surgeons and other specialists. So these hospitals are still sheltering also thousands of displaced people. At Al-Ahli, currently about 10 staff, all junior doctors and nurses, continue to provide basic first aid, pain management as much as possible, wound care, and trauma stabilization service. Many of these patients have lost family members and don't have anyone to bring them water or food. Some of them are severely injured and have been waiting for surgery for 2 weeks. Others have been operated on but are now at risk of post-operation infection due to lack of antibiotics and other drugs. All these patients cannot move and need to be transferred urgently to have a chance to survive. Bodies from recent attacks are lined up in the courtyard and they can't be given safe and dignified burials. The WHO calls again for a humanitarian ceasefire. This is needed now to reinforce and restock remaining health facilities, deliver medical services needed by thousands of injured people and those needing other essential care, and above all, to stop the bloodshed and death.
And for the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the conflict in Gaza is a moral failure of the international community and is urging warring parties to reach a new deal to halt the fighting. Although ICRC facilitated the release of hostages, the group has been criticized by some Israelis for not doing more to have hostages freed. Some social media users have equated the organization to a taxi service to drive the hostages out of Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared to confirm last week that new negotiations were underway to recover hostages still held by Hamas after a source said Israel's intelligence chief met the Prime Minister of Qatar, considered a mediator in the conflict.
We have a situation that happens under our watch. I have started speaking of moral failure because every day this continues will be a day more where the international community hasn't proven capable of ending such high levels of suffering, and this will have an impact on generations, not only in Gaza but beyond Gaza, because these images remain. Nothing can happen without an agreement by both sides. There are certain modalities that need to be negotiated by them through intermediaries. That can be Qatar, and actually at the moment is Qatar. They have to agree on the steps, on the whereabouts where we can access the hostages, and we require the security guarantees. Events over the weekend have shown you that it's not only about our own security, our own staff, it is about the security of the hostages. And that is a given. There's no way around this. There's no silver bullet. There's nothing without an agreement by the two sides. So we urge them to keep negotiating and to keep facilitating the space that we need in order to operationalize the releases. And the releases in themselves are highly complex, highly sensitive missions. You don't just go there and take the hostages and bring them out. So any references to us being an Uber service or a taxi service are just beside the point. And I personally find them unacceptable and outrageous. I mean, our colleagues risk their lives, their safety and security during these operations, and the hostages are highly exposed while these things are ongoing.
Well, staying with the hostage situation, a freed Israeli hostage revisited the scene of his abduction by Hamas and told how he was treated while held in Gaza. 18-year-old Ofer Engel was released after 54 days in Hamas captivity and on Wednesday spoke at Kibbutz Be'eri, which was attacked on October 7. Be'eri is about 2 kilometers from Gaza and was one of the sites worst hit by Hamas. Family members of other Israeli hostages also recalled the moment when their loved ones were taken away.
Interned the house, 2 with guns, 1 with RPG. First thing, they shoot the dog. Then they took me into a black cab. The last thing I remember is being carried away, and Yuval, my girlfriend, say I love you. One of the most difficult moments was when the terrorists moved us twice in absolute darkness with non-stop booms all around us. I was there, and every moment the hostages are there is danger. They have no time. Why do I get to be here and they don't? They all have to come back home now.
This place became the place where my dad was taken from, where my mom was taken from. I'm standing here now in these clothes, barefoot, because my dad was kidnapped from our home when he was in boxers and barefoot in his underwear. Because as you see here, it's a normal houses. We are in our kibbutz, our place. And he was in bed in the morning, and they just came into my home and took him. My dad are defenseless now. He have no weapon, no gun, no self-defense of any kind. And I'm just so afraid. I'm afraid that my dad wouldn't come back.
Still ahead on the program and away from the Israeli-Hamas war, firefighters battle wildlife for a 3rd day in South Africa. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. In Argentina, the president has signed an economic reform decree that will end limits on exports and authorize measures to loosen regulations as his new government combats a severe economic crisis. But this did not sit well with many as they rejected the move, causing protests outside Argentina's Congress. Many were banging pots and waving the national flag, arguing that the measures are a blow to the entire working class. Earlier in the day, thousands took to the streets of Buenos Aires to protest the government's austerity plans, led by representatives for the unemployed, demanding for more support for the poor. Argentina's poverty rate soared by past 40% in the first half of this year. We'll call it a threat or a warning, but North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has said that Pyongyang would not hesitate to launch a nuclear attack if an enemy provokes it with nuclear weapons. President Kim made the remark as he met with soldiers under the military's Missile Bureau over its recent launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Still photographs shows Mr. Kim accompanied by his daughter meeting with the soldiers and posing for group photos. North Korea's launch demonstrated the military's high mobility and rapid attack capability and called for efforts to further strengthen its combat efficiency. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has described as worrisome recent maritime incidents in the South China Sea, which involved his military chief of staff. Philippines had earlier in December accused the Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia of repeatedly firing water cannons at its boats during a resupply mission, causing serious engine damage to one and deliberately ramming another. Beijing and Philippines have traded sharp accusations in recent months over a succession of run-ins in the South China Sea.
The recent incidents involving no less than our AFP Chief of Staff is worrisome. Yes, but it is a proud demonstration of Filipino courage against coercion and our firm resolve to protect, preserve, and uphold our territorial integrity. But despite the many attempts at provocation, the Philippines, through the AFP, remains a force and a voice of reason, exemplifying responsible and dignified behavior in resolving issues in accordance with international law.
The European Union reached an agreement today on new rules designed to share out the cost and work of hosting migrants more evenly and to limit the numbers of people coming in. Representatives of the European Parliament and of EU governments reached an accord after all-night talks on EU laws collectively called the new Pact on Migration and Asylum that should take effect next year. The laws cover screening irregular migrants when they arrive in the European Union, procedures for handling asylum applications, rules on determining which EU country is responsible for handling applications, and ways to handle crisis.
As of this morning, at 8 o'clock, we do have the agreement on this holistic European framework. This is a proud testament to the fact that Europe can deliver solutions on issues that matter to the many. And this is the case on migration. With the agreement, we are introducing a new and mandatory screening at all borders of all arrivals. In a second stage, all those unlikely to get asylum will have to go through mandatory, fast-tracked border procedures with streamlined procedures for dealing quickly with asylum claims and efficiently processing returns of those who have no legal reason to be under the European Union's protection. This system will create a seamless procedure at our external borders, which will ensure that people are quickly channeled to and through the right procedures at all times.
Over in the United Kingdom, where British Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt has said that there will still further go on tackling inflation after data showed it fell last month. British inflation plunged in November to its lowest rate in over 2 years, prompting investors to pile further into bets that the Bank of England will cut interest rates next year. According to the Office for National Statistics, the annual rate of increase in the Consumer Prices Index dropped to 3.9% from 4.6% in October, pushed down in part by petrol prices for its lowest reading since September 2021.
It is because the government took very difficult decisions, particularly in the autumn statement that I delivered a year ago, that what the government does in terms of tax and spend and what the Bank of England does in terms of interest rates work together to bring the inflation rate down. If we hadn't taken those difficult decisions, we wouldn't have this dramatic reduction in inflation today. But there's still further to go. Inflation never falls in a straight line. And what we want to do for families up and down the country is to move away from this era of prices continually going up, because we know what pressure it's putting on family budgets. A year ago, inflation was 11.1%. Now it's fallen to 3.9%, the lowest for over 2 years. And that shows the government's plan for the economy is working. But nonetheless, it is very tough for a lot of families. And that's why from next month, national insurance contributions will go down by 2%. That's worth £450 a year for someone on the average wage. And I hope that will make a difference to a lot of families up and down the country.
New Zealand's new Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has met with his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese in Sydney. Both parties are expected to look into the benefits of joining a part of the Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States Defence Pact. Mr. Luxon, who was sworn in as Prime Minister last month, said the AUKUS weapons development and procurement project between the US, Britain and Australia would help ensure peace and stability in the Pacific region. Mr. Albanese, on the other hand, said Australia would continue to deepen its trade and economic ties with New Zealand and work together to respond to shared challenges, including climate change.
Our common values that we have as nations mean that there are great opportunities for us to work together on closer economic ties, closer social ties, and working together in the international community to meet our common objectives. Australia and New Zealand will continue to support Pacific priorities, working together to respond to our region's shared challenges. And that includes, of course, very importantly, our action dealing with climate change.
Well, the first thing I'd say is, look, AUKUS is a very important element in ensuring we've got stability and peace within the region. And, we've talked about it. There's a number of countries that are increasing their military capabilities, and it's a more contested region for sure. We will always have our nuclear-free position. That's non-negotiable for us in New Zealand. But we already have our navies that work together in an incredibly interoperable way, and we want to see more interoperability, frankly, between our respective defence forces. So from my point of view, we are interested in exploring Pillar 2, particularly in AUKUS, and the new technologies and and the opportunities that may mean for New Zealand to participate.
In the United States, healthcare costs continue to skyrocket, especially for vulnerable Americans, elderly and those with chronic diseases. In just over 1 year, 4,000 drugs have increased in costs, with increases surpassing inflation rates. The Biden-Harris administration has enhanced legislation to reduce prescription drug costs for recent immigrants and American citizens. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, has more.
Thank you so much for joining us. We know this is a very exciting time for your office and for the Biden-Harris administration. As we talk about prescription drugs, we know that healthcare has been a major tackling issue of the administration for quite some time. Tell us really, what does this new program mean? What can Americans look forward to?
The president has made affordable healthcare coverage a key priority of this administration. We're at record low levels of people who are uninsured because he's worked so hard to make sure people have coverage. And one key area is in prescription drug costs. And there are a lot of programs that CMS administers, but I hear the most about prescription drug costs from people who are over the age of 65, people with disabilities. And those are the people that are typically covered by the Medicare program. So regardless of income, if you're a senior in this country, you're usually enrolled in the Medicare program. And again, people with some very significant disabilities. And so what we are announcing right now are some of the new steps that we are taking. We are going to be charging drug companies that increase their prices above inflation, a rebate that they'll pay back to the federal government. And in some cases, people will pay less. And this is one way that the Biden-Harris administration is really focused on trying to urge drug companies to stop raising prices on the American people.
Before we go, I have to ask, universal health care has been on the table in the U.S. for quite some time. We know that many countries across the world offer free health care. How is this getting us closer to ensuring that all Americans, we have, higher than we should infant mortality rates, and we know that a lot of mothers oftentimes don't have proper prenatal care. So tell us how this is getting us closer to ensuring that everyone has the appropriate access to health care.
We are working so hard to get everyone enrolled in this country in whatever program is appropriate for them, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, Marketplace, their employer-sponsored insurance. And we are trying all hands on deck. The administration in particular, we are focused on doing outreach to harder reach communities. And that's why I think we've seen such an increase in enrollment across these programs. We have 40 states now that have expanded postpartum coverage. So mothers, I'm a mother, and I marvel now at the idea, when you're 2 months after you've given birth, to actually have to change your coverage when you're juggling washing the dishes, figuring out how to get yourself. I still remember being in my OBGYN's office, and I had to bring my daughter in because I didn't have somewhere to put her, someone to take care of her that day. You're struggling, and to, in the middle of that, have to switch your coverage. It's just so difficult. And we lose so many moms during that postpartum period. It's not just the period of time where she gives birth. It's those couple of months later where symptoms are missed. So it's so crucial that we keep people on coverage and make sure they can see their doctor, make sure they can get access to their drugs. And so the administration cares so deeply about making sure we get people insured and that coverage is meaningful. And that's why we're so excited about what we're doing in the Medicare program to make drug coverage more affordable, because seniors and people with disabilities are often taking 8 or more drugs a day. And so it's so crucial that we keep those affordable so that they can get the care that they need.
Administrator Brooks-LaSure, we thank you so much for joining us, and we thank you for sharing about this new news around prescription medication costs and reducing the cost. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Maria. Moving on, firefighters are still battling a wildfire 3 days after it broke out in the Simonstown of South Africa. The wild blaze, coupled with heavy winds, started early on Tuesday on a mountain overlooking Simonstown, which is about 40 kilometers south of Cape Town. Helicopter operations to put out the blaze with water from the ocean resumed in the early hours of today. While authorities have said evacuations were not needed, they noted that the fire was getting close to properties and the situation was being monitored. Staying in South Africa, the country has grappled with the profound racial challenges and incidents that have shaped its complex social political landscape stemming from the historical legacy of apartheid. The most recent racial video in South Africa sparked outrage on social media after a teenage white boy uttered the K words during a YouTube live stream. The South African Human Rights Commission is investigating the matter. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Simusa, has details.
Incidents that spotlight racial divisions occasionally emerge, reminding the nation of the ongoing struggle for unity and equality. Almost every month, the South African Human Rights Commission receives a flood of racial complaints.
On the same white man.
Addressing his supporters at the Western Cape 3rd Provincial People's Assembly, the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, says violence should be responded to with violence.
Why are the victims of racism not attracted to you? Do you exist in paper, or do you exist amongst our people? And do you help these victims of racism to confront racism and nip it on the bud.
In a quest to address these challenges, Mr. Uche Ononeze launched a book titled You Aren't Black or White, One Human Race, Unequal Societies.
I am a freedom fighter. Two things compelled me to write this book. That is a saying that not until the animals begin to tell their story, the story will always glorify the hunter. So it's time for Africans to begin to tell our own story.
The launch saw the distinguished presence of influential figures such as Yvonne Chaka Chaka, the Turkish ambassador to South Africa, Her Excellency Aisha Kadesh, and Professor Matole Mutseha.
You know, President Seretse Khama said in 1917 that African people must write their own history, because a people who don't know their history and heritage are a people without a soul.
We should recognize our humanness. We should recognize that we are all a human race. And I'm sure Uche can elaborate more on the book. For me, it's about respecting each other as humans. And it can't be better than that.
The continent has been highly polarized for lack of the truth. And the truth has been, or should be, that we have been sitting with global deception for hundreds of years. And what will stem from this book is that we will see how the structure of the content will filter into policy making in nations.
The journey towards reconciliation and dismantling systemic racism remains an ongoing process. From Pretoria, South Africa, at the University of South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television.
Well, counting has started in some polling stations after Wednesday's election in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as voting lasted until late in the evening. The Electoral Commission had to extend elections into Thursday for those whose polling stations did not open at all on Wednesday, prompting a group of opposition presidential candidates to call for a rerun of the vote. The head of the Electoral Commission estimates that at least 70% of voters had the chance to cast their ballots. President Felix Tshisekedi faces 18 candidates as he seeks a second term in this high-stakes election. 4 of his challengers have called for the entire poll to be cancelled. Results are supposed to be announced by December 31st. The winner will be the candidate with the most votes with no runoff if they fail to cross the 50% mark. And still ahead on the program, Christmas markets in full swing in Moscow as Russians prepare for the festive season. To bring you that story and more after the break, please join us again. Welcome back now to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia claimed it had repelled Ukrainian offensives in multiple directions, while Ukraine says its forces had attacked various Russian targets in the previous 24 hours. The Russian Defense Ministry said in a report that the Russian military had repelled the Ukrainian offensive in Kupiansk and Krancy and Lyman and other directions and attacked Ukrainian military personnel, tanks and military vehicles in the direction of Donetsk. It added that the Russian air defense system shot down 1 Ukrainian Mi-24 helicopter and 32 drones and intercepted multiple rockets. On the other hand, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said that there were 89 battles in the frontline areas in the previous 24 hours. The Ukrainian military says it's holding back the enemy in the battle for the eastern town of Advika, adding that the Ukrainian rocket artillery unit struck targets in areas where Russian military personnel and equipment gathered. Let's get more. The VOA's Anna Chanikova joins us now. Anna, great to see you today. Let's begin with a tit-for-tat move between Russia and Ukraine. What has been going on in the past 24 hours?
Good evening. Well, I should say the situation is not changing much as what we can see for the past months, actually. And of course, Russian forces have certain advance in the east, the eastern front line. However, we cannot say, at least at what we can see at this moment from the front line reports, we cannot see this, such a huge progress, let's put it this way. There is certain advance in some areas. Ukrainian forces also in some areas managed to keep the defense lines unchanged. So we can say at this point that situation remains tough. Eastern front line remains extremely intense. South front line remains less intense, but we cannot see much changes in there as well. So at this moment, it's quite, I guess, clear, at least according to what Russian military officials report and what Ukrainian military officials report. We can see that the winter and the weather conditions do not play a great role for both sides. So at this moment, we will have to see and wait what's going to happen next. Definitely, Russian forces. We should also understand have more manpower and also certain advance in terms of equipment. Ukraine still has enough to keep the defense lines. However, as military support and military aid is on pause at this point, it could be that Ukrainian forces will not have enough very soon. Already, Ukrainian officials are saying that this pause in the aid created certain troubles on the battlefield, I should say that Ukraine hopes that the aid will be unblocked and will come soon.
And there have been reports, Anna, that Ukrainian men between the ages of 25 and 60 living abroad will be expected to report for military service, and there will be sanctions against anyone who did not comply. How are people reacting to this?
This news came from the Minister of Defense of Ukraine just recently. And at first, after his announcement, everyone understood that the man abroad would have to actually go to particular commissions or whatever bodies would be created to register for military service. And if they do not do so, there will be quite bad sanctions in terms of even something like arrest or something like this. So it was not specified. However, after this news was out and was public, Minister of Defense. Representatives from the Ministry of Defense made it a little bit more clear. So it was said that, and it was confirmed that registration would be introduced, and it would be suggested that Ukrainian citizens come and register for military service. However, in terms of sanctions, it's not clear yet what would be possible to do and what would be the scale of the sanctions. But what's important to understand as well from what Minister said, that there is a number, and there are quite a lot of men who registered abroad, particularly in some European countries. The number of this men is quite high, and this is the reason why Ukrainian officials, military officials, are thinking of basically searching for them and make them register for military service.
And finally, Anna, even as the war drags on, we know the festive period is near. How are Ukrainians gearing up for Christmas, those who are able to celebrate? And I can just imagine what the mood is like in Ukraine, in Kiev, where you are, and other parts which have bore the brunt of the invasion by Russia.
The Christmas is on this Sunday through Sunday to Monday, and of course Ukrainians. Well, I should say that the mood is not particularly happy, especially Ukrainians for these past 2 days continue to discuss the recent press conference that President Zelensky gave as a final press conference of 2023, and this press conference did not really create any additional optimistic mood. I should say a lot of people are quite nervous and quite scared of what 2024 will bring. So I cannot say that mood is festive or that people are, happy enough for Christmas and Christmas mood is around. People are trying to create at least a little bit of Christmas mood, especially for children, to keep this magic moment at least for children present. And of course, people are getting ready to celebrate and to welcome Christmas with their families, and definitely hope and pray for better future for Ukraine. I think that this will be a very, very tough both festive period and as well as next year, the beginning of next year and the whole next year.
Right, Anna, we must thank you very much. And ahead of the celebrations, we do wish you, the much you can celebrate, to have you celebrating Christmas.
Thank you.
And speaking of Christmas, it's the first time Ukrainians are participating in the Yuletide celebrations amid what Russia calls its special military operation in Kyiv. Kyiv residents flocked to the capital city center to watch the Christmas tree opening ceremony with Kyiv's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko.
With their military locked in 21-month-old war against Russia, is the first time many Ukrainians are celebrating Christmas on December the 25th. It comes after Ukraine's main Orthodox Church in May 2023 decided to switch to a calendar in which Christmas is celebrated on December 25th, a move that distances it from Russia. Both December 25th and January 7th have been official state holidays in Ukraine since 2017, in recognition of the large numbers celebrating Christmas on both dates. But calls for a general move to December 25th grew after Russia's bloody February 2022 invasion. Despite the signs of an ongoing war, destroyed adversary military equipment, wounded servicemen, and portraits of falling soldiers are displayed in cemeteries across the country. Ukraine's wartime capital is lit up for the holiday season. But on the front line, sub-zero temperatures are complicating the fight for forces. As tens of thousands of troops man frontline positions in a 21-month-old war, there are fears Moscow could attack the power grid with airstrikes against this winter. Russia claimed last May to fully capture the smashed eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, ending the longest and bloodiest battle of the war. Bakhmut is a focal point for the Ukrainian counteroffensive, but Ukraine hasn't made major gains in the area. Russia, however, has also made no tangible progress since capturing Bakhmut. Ukraine, which initially saw tens of thousands of eager volunteers queue up to fight off Russia's invasion, is now trying to conscript more men to replace those currently at the front.
Well, the festive season market on the flip side, Moscow's Red Square is in full swing and elaborate decorations can be seen all around the center of the Russian capital ahead of traditional New Year celebrations. New Year's Day is Russia's main seasonal holiday. while Orthodox believers also celebrate Christmas on January the 7th. At this time of the year, locals and tourists were excited to flock to Moscow's open-air ice skating rinks. However, despite the festive atmosphere in Moscow, the conflict in Ukraine will weigh heavily on the minds of many Russians, especially those with male relatives fighting at the front.
Пойдем за ним. Вот, Ян, направо.
That's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers. Good night.